A very warm, and I should say actually it's a damn chilly welcome here in Ireland right now for Capital Sports 3.0. I'm your co-host for this evening, Alan Moore, and in just a moment I'm going to bring in my other co-host, the brilliant and inimitable Legal Iseult Cody. But before I do, we're going to have a nice, short, sharp, snappy, and really, really to the point show tonight. You're going to love it. You're going to love the topics because they basically are very much on point. And a lot of discussion around these. A lot of people are kind of talking around the houses for both these topics. And especially one of them, people are a little bit afraid to discuss. But on Capital Sports, we've never shied away from anything. And probably to our detriment in many ways, but it's also to our benefit as well. So straight away, bringing Iseult Cody. Iseult, great to see you again. And I'll see you soon.
In person tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. Iseult, there's an awful going on in the world today. We discussed a lot of the events. We see that, thanks be to God, and please praying for it, that Ukraine and Russia will start to make peace. That looks like it is coming on board. Finally, the adults are coming into the room and saying, listen, stop this nonsense and just please talk and find a way to go forward and to stop fighting. Middle East is getting worse. It's stretching out. It's getting an awful lot worse. And what we see coming through from Gaza just seems unbelievable. It's worse than the worst horror movie or video game. One thing, our first topic right now that we're going to discuss is the UEFA playoffs. UEFA playoffs, of course, they've all been announced. We know the groups, we know who's playing where and so on, and that Scotland are going to make it out of their group because they're going to probably beat Germany. But there's also one playoff that a lot of people are discussing, and people are kind of afraid to delve into it. And that, of course, is Israel and their chance for qualifying out of a quartet of themselves, Ukraine, Bosnia, and Iceland. And they play Iceland on March 21st. The winners of that then face the winners of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Ukraine on March 26th for a place in the Euros. Big question, Iseult, and I'm going to just leave it straight over to you. Should Israel be allowed to compete? And if UEFA won't say anything, should the other country say, listen, lads, I'm sorry, stop the fighting first and then we'll play some football?
I think it is a very, very complicated issue. My views on it, obviously, I would be very much of the opinion that you need to sanction countries who break international law, and that goes across the board. I think the difficulty is here that there is obviously support for Israel coming from a lot of places, unfortunately. And when I say unfortunately, it's nothing against the Israeli people. It is certainly not an anti-Semitic view. It is the fact of what we are all witnessing are horrendous atrocities. And what I think the difficulty here becomes, and unfortunately we have in recent memory, obviously, we've seen sanctions against Russia for the invasion. I suppose in this instance, Israel will point to an incident of provocation that I suppose we can't ignore what went on the 7th of October, but by the same token, there is a long-standing history there on both sides, and what is currently happening is obviously both very upsetting and very frightening to watch. The difficulty in, if we are not taking sanctions, if sanctions are not being levelled across the board outside of the sports world, I think it is very difficult for the sports world to take a step forward because they risk I suppose and people will say, well, is it not worth the risk? But they risk legal proceedings being taken against them by any country or individual athletes, etc., who are taken out of competition. If we are not seeing sanctions in other areas, is it appropriate to expect sports to be the area that goes first, particularly where they don't have the backup of, they have international condemnation of certain actions, but they don't have across the board sanctions. And I think when we look at the obvious comparator, as we all know, is Russia. When we look at the sanctions taken against Russia, sport was quick on the heels in certain instances of other areas, but ultimately the sanctions came initially from governments, from the UN, from other areas first, and sport followed. And I think it would be a lot to ask. I think the difficulty and the real difficulty that will present itself for Israeli teams competing across the board will be, firstly, you will have a lot of people who are quite upset, and you will probably have protests at games, competitions, whatever form of sport they're participating in. But you also do run the risk of having an incident where you have a team like Ukraine, who are currently in conflict, against a team like Israel, who they will presumably view as an aggressor going into another country. And I suppose it's a little more than close to home from a Ukrainian perspective. And I suppose there is also that if you speak out and say, oh, there should be sanctions, then are you being anti-Semitic? Whereas what we need to look at is, unlike with the Russian and Ukrainian conflict, in the last few days, we did have a pause. And while that doesn't right the wrongs, and obviously the on-the-ground assault has resumed and continues, from the perspective of going forward, where the Americans in particular, I'm sounding like we're going on a very political show now, but when the Americans in particular are so involved in the background of trying to get further humanitarian aid in, etc., it's an ongoing and evolving position that there may be pauses, there's an opportunity for hostages to come out. I think it's a lot to ask sport to be the first to take steps, especially when there isn't that across the board. Internationally, sanctions have to come outside of sport first, in my view, because it's the international condemnation. I also do think, the way we discussed this previously on the show, where certain teams can't be drawn against one another. And it's a long-standing rule. Look, existing conflicts on the ground, historical conflicts, we can't draw certain teams. Sometimes you just wish there was that little bit of cop on to go, maybe drawing Israel and a country currently involved in a conflict of their own is not in the same group. It's a particularly uncomfortable one, but I suppose there you go with the look of the draw, in the sense of, I suppose it shows some level of it just happened. I think it'll be very difficult for, depending on where we are in a couple of months' time, for an Israeli team to compete without it drawing a large amount of attention. And again,
that's it. Look, Issa, it's the one thing that we said from the very start when we were live on air. We were live on air when the initial UEFA's move to freeze Russia. We commented on air. It was breaking as we were on air, and we got direct from UEFA, and we were very lucky to have Alexander Zotov with us to discuss it. Of course, he was then part of the Russian Executive Committee for the Football Union and also the head of the Footballers Union. And the main point that we kept straight away from it wasn't even to punish Russia, because punishing countries through sport, in my view, still it never really helps. We need dialogue. We need to be able to meet on an even playing field. But it was a whole safety issue, because we've discussed it over and over. The idiots from we saw them, they went into, what was it the other day? The Stop Oil. They broke into, I think it was Westminster Cathedral. They went into a carol session.
Now, you risk player welfare. And again, there's nothing wrong with peaceful protest whatsoever.
No, I agree.
There's a huge disparity between peaceful protest. And we don't know, like, a player might be representing their country. We don't know what their personal views are. And we can't go down the route again of asking players to come out. Because you see it even online at the moment. You have influencers saying, oh, I haven't said anything about this, and now people are criticizing me. Well, from the perspective of sports players, we saw that already, where people were being criticized or not allowed to compete. Wimbledon, let's just think about that. Oh, you haven't outwardly said you're anti the conflict. You have to remember, these people have family members living in a given country, or they may alienate family members who are,
And also, we also know as well that there were a lot of, and again, Ukrainians, and having spoken with Ukrainian athletes and tennis players in particular, who said, we can't hug our opponent. We'll speak with them off court, but we have to, we can't even fist bump. They touch tennis rackets simply because legally they could be sued. They could lose their property. It's a whole minefield. With the Israelis, the danger could be, and again, with the Israeli national teams, athletes, so this is broad scale, there are people who are of an Islamic faith, and not just, who will use this opportunity to strike, because they're basically people who will,
they represent a flag when they're abroad.
Yeah. And it's not about religion. These people who will go and blow up something or murder people, it's never driven by religion. Religion is the cover for it, but it's just a sick inhumanity in the person who will do it.
I suppose we're really living in perhaps it's with the fresh perspective of things in Ireland over the last few weeks. We're living in an era where there are a lot of people out there who want to do something, whether it be attack someone, whether it be break into a shop, whether it be riot. All they look for is an excuse or an opportunity.
Ethan, look, we saw. I was coming by Parnell Street, and again, when that I was in Kaliningrad in Russia. Actually, I was just on the way to Gdansk when that it was breaking overnight, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then people were asking me, "What the hell is happening in Dublin?" Sergey Kuzmin, friend of ours from the show, was like, "Alan, what's happening in Dublin?" I'm like, "I just said this is like these people who are being labelled by these the riots in Dublin." And the public disorder, people who were doing this being labeled as vermin. And I thought, wait, hold on. You cannot call another human being vermin. And the people who were using this word were people who, for example, on Twitter, or who I know personally, who I like. I'm like, I prefer to say that this was scumbaggery. These were people who basically took advantage of a situation. There was, and speaking to guards who were there on duty, as I said, so many people were just literally in the area. They were homeless, and they were caught up in the whole thing. So, but you know, again,
there also were a lot of people who travelled in because on last Friday I was in the same area, and there was obviously a very big Garda presence. But I literally said to people on the way home, because I was just texting them on the train and going, yeah, there was a lot of people around who were almost waiting to see if it might kick off again another week later, and they're not people who have a strong feeling on any of the issues that they would suggest led to any of this, which and again, which in my opinion are absolute nonsense. But basically, these are people who are opportunistically hanging around, and then, oh great, we can break into like a Foot Locker.
Look, anyway. we said the same. Again, we were on the air and we discussed it on Capital Sports 2.0 as well. The Black Lives Matter riots and disorder in America. Most of the people who are breaking into Walmarts or smashing up people or attacking people in cars, dragging from cars, they were just violent thugs, opportunists. They weren't left wing, right wing. They just
we have to remember there have been great causes in history when, like, the LA riots were spurred by a huge reason for people to, a need for people to make it clear that they weren't comfortable with what had happened. And obviously when you police killing anyone, it's a fairly serious issue. But in every large group, there will always be either the outliers or the mob mentality, where it isn't reflective of the majority of people, hopefully.
No. And again, you know, we'll bring it back onto this thing with Israel. Match goes ahead. There cannot be people in the stadium. It will have to be locked down.
Yeah.
There is a possibility. I spoke with an Icelandic journalist 2 days ago, and she said, look, there's a chance Iceland, or sorry, not 2 days ago, yesterday, Monday, Iceland are not happy having to play Israel. So they are looking at what they can do. So again, Russia were forced out of the European playoffs, or the playoffs in Europe, because other teams refused to play them, and rightly so. And I agree. If I was like, you know, if it was Ireland playing, I would say no. I think it's a bad thing. It's not even with the war; it's the danger around it, and that's what we're going to face again with this. So, okay, the next one, and this is kind of related to what happened a couple of weeks ago in Dublin, and an interesting one. It is this man looking to run for president of Ireland. Now, Isolt, this is something he's announced. We'll have a little, we have a little audio coming up in a moment. But Conor McGregor, friend of the show, car crash in the making. We both, as people, know the decency within him and the good things he's done. But this is stretching reality, Isolt.
So I'm going to try and balance it all out, because I'm going to try and be balanced about this. I will start by saying we are all aware of some of the good things, and I will say good things that Conor McGregor has done, particularly in Ireland during COVID, when there was an inavailability and shortage of PPE. He made huge arrangements to get them to doctors' practices, etc., around the country. Good job. At the same time, this is a man who has shown a blatant disrespect for women, a blatant disrespect for the rule of law, just based alone on his numerous driving issues that he's been in front of the court with, not to mention other issues which haven't gone before a court. But he also then, and he is currently under investigation, as the national newspapers here are reporting, for his part in what happened Thursday, the week before last, when essentially his tweets are being viewed as something as inflammatory, which they clearly were, because unless you're going to suggest that his audience and those who primarily he directs his tweets at have a more insightful view and can decipher that that isn't what's intended. It was very similar, and ironically, as we're discussing presidential runs, to that of Trump, where he tried to suggest after his tweets on the day of the Capitol Hill riots that he hadn't suggested people go out and riot. It's a bit late when you know, firstly, your audience, you know what they want you to say, and you know how they will interpret it. And I think McGregor, like, it's laughable how people are so quick to forget so many stories. This is a man who punched another, I'd forgotten about that, he punched a man in a bar for not drinking his whiskey. Like, this is not the type of role model.
And not just a young man as well.
Anyone. An older gentleman. But this is not the type of man you would want as a role model. This is not the type of man you would want representing your country on a global stage. And more than anything, like, we are very, very lucky at some of the presidents we have had in my lifetime alone, who have been, in particular, if we were to just discuss Mary McAleese briefly, a woman who couldn't have been more, I suppose, engrossed in the peace process, in the sense that she literally came from a community where her family were directly involved and impacted by the violence in Northern Ireland and the Troubles. They were forced to move out of where they had lived. She has been hugely instrumental on a global stage in trying to point out the importance of peace between nations, and obviously was instrumental in the Queen's visit to Ireland, which was a hugely significant time. Mary Robinson, former UN High Commissioner, has been hugely involved and currently is ongoing involvement in the COP in Dubai, which is ongoing at the moment. And we have obviously our current president, who, while outspoken in his support of Gaza, which I'm sure has ruffled some feathers, he is a former poet, and quite literally, like, Michael D couldn't be a more emblematic of, like, a man of, like, peace, care for community. He is just everything you would want in a representative of your country on a national stage. And his and my politics may not always align, but I think he is a great symbol for Ireland. Conor McGregor isn't even a great symbol for MMA fighters. Like, it's worrying that no one has said, like, some of the things he has come out with. Have we all forgotten some of the horrible racist nonsense he has been on about? And Ireland for the Irish is just, not only is it embarrassing and depressing, we have such an incredibly short memory in Ireland. We forget that we went everywhere. We were welcomed everywhere, and anywhere where we weren't welcomed, we still stayed. That was kind of our motto. We're going to stay here until we're almost part of the community, and then we are the community. I understand that people have concerns about people coming into a country. Like, obviously, the argument that keeps getting thrown out is that, oh, in the US, obviously, if you're found to be an illegal immigrant, you're sent back. They're forgetting a few things here. They're forgetting the fact that the Irish don't go to the US seeking asylum, which is a very specific international ability to seek refuge. They're also saying, oh, why aren't checks done on these people? Kind of goes hand in hand that if you're seeking asylum, chances are you may not have documentation, and chances are you're coming from somewhere where your background may be such that you may have convictions, they may be right or wrong, or you may not, but you may have come from huge persecution. That aside, when a man who has who has fought on an international stage, who has had involvement with people from all different nationalities, who sells his beer on a global, or whatever it is, stout, beer, whatever, and whiskey, let's not forget it's whiskey, on a global market, and he wants to take this sort of stance, like, it's incredibly short-sighted. But it's also knowing his audience, and his audience, I hate to use the word limited, but I'm going to use the word limited, because you're just stoking up that level of hatred.
Isel, they've always been that way, because all the lads who were flying to Las Vegas, who were flying to wherever it may be to support him.
I've
It
spent
was
my money
all
to
of a
go see
type.
Conor McGregor, so I'm
It was all of a
say,
type.
but I have spent my money to go see Conor McGregor. But I was going to see Conor McGregor, MMA fighter. Everyone found the banter at his press conferences amusing, the swagger, the cockiness. But there's a difference between that and when his words are used to hype up. He knows how many people look at his tweets. He's seen in the last week, like it feeds his ego. Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon going on about, oh, Conor McGregor speaking for the people. Well, no, he's hopefully speaking for a small minority, but a minority that are stupid enough to take his words as gospel and go out and act on them. And
but will they vote, Iseult? And let's be honest.
We're asking a lot of them to go out and manage to tick a box, like.
Exactly, and I mean, look.
But I do worry, because if the mentality is out there that he thinks people would elect him, what does that say about our society? And I will tell you, as a woman, and knowing even a quarter of the things he is supposed to have done to women, and if half of the convictions he has were rightly given, not to mention the punching of an elderly gentleman, he certainly is not someone who I would want representing my country. It's more embarrassing than Trump.
Look, there's people who we see who are now leading countries. I mean, Boris Johnson, one of the most, who basically gave a number.
The Whig in Argentina. There's lots of ridiculous things.
All these really terrible people, like Boris Johnson, who was organizing to get a journalist beaten up, basically given and who has no moral fiber whatsoever. But again,
he has no moral fiber. But at least at the same time, God, I'd prefer him to McGregor.
No, you see, this is where we go wrong. We say, isn't this the better one? And even people now saying,
yeah, but Boris isn't going to run over here. But we just can't. We cannot risk Ireland as a nation. We're better people than that, and that's. I would just hope that the majority would suddenly go, we don't normally vote in presidential elections. That is also my fear, the low voter turnout. Hopefully, by then, McGregor will have done something so ridiculous that he won't be in a position.
I think as you said, Michael D. Higgins, terrific person, loves League of Ireland football, loves sport, and his wife as well, Sabrina, a terrific person. And remember that it was the Polite Society of Ireland who, when she said, we need peace in Ukraine, we just need to talk and have peace, they turned on her as a woman. Who does she think she is? She shouldn't be speaking. They wanted her sanctioned. And the same with Michael Higgins, when he said, there needs to be peace, boys, come on, let's talk. He was attacked. So maybe people are expecting this more of a braggadocio, someone who's going to just lay it on the line, as they say, or lay it on the line, basically be an idiot. But this is something that an interesting one.
He'd be impeached within a month.
Well, I don't think it'd be.
He won't get to that stage.
No, he won't be elected. He won't be elected. It's full stop.
It's frightening that this is we go on the show, and this is something that I was very conscious of when some of McGregor's comments were coming out. We go on and on about when athletes have a platform, how important it is they use it when they have the appropriate opportunity to do so. McGregor is no longer. When was the last time he fought? He's no longer an athlete. McGregor is just someone with a beer company and a whiskey company who is tweeting abuse and inciting hatred.
And rapping as well. And this is something he laid down, I think it was today or yesterday.
Adela! He's back and he's trying to talk the rah. You little yellow pimple virgin. Yeah, that serves the queen in the orange order in your kitchen. Wet wipe, you couldn't wipe your nose, never mind pipe at home. And I told you about the caddy, you can take a bomb. Just ask your mom. I had her in the back singing the real Rebel song. You little nerd talking fights. It took you 3.5 hours to write that shite. It'd be less for me jet to take flight, catch it in the dead of the night and give you a little fry. And what you shouting for? Spit and mucus all over your phone and blood and scabs all over your dome. Lad, you're a model for infection. You skinny weird bollocks, you need a stew injection. Daylight, sunshine, lollipops and rainbows. I push one button, you're seeing angels. Now remember who made you, me and Mary. Your mom's and her hurdy. I don't give a fuck, in real life I'm bad and scaredy. I catch cases and I beat them. I catch weaklings and I eat them. Yeah, nothing to me. Who the fuck is that guy? Jeremy Stephen. If I wasn't so holy, I'd be a demon. Oh, holy Jesus, I'm on this thing still plotting $1 billion. With me rat-head minions. Pocket change. Rusty rifles pulled out of the ground and let off at close range. Pow, 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 pow. You're dead. Break out the proper 12 and 4 stout champagne.
I still believe that that's someone doing a parody. I'm certain that's someone doing a parody.
Either way, it's just, it's worrying when you have to wonder, is it a parody?
It's like, it's not going to make the Christmas top 10, that's for sure. But again, I think, you know, we discussed this. I'll call it out straight away. The man has a cocaine problem. It's been a long-standing issue. I think it's, you know, can't say, oh, some people can handle their drugs. No, with cocaine, it's too powerful, and I think it just needs to be stopped. And it's a pity. And I think, you know, the fact that we're actually discussing this shows just where we are in society.
It really does. It's a bad reflection.
Yeah. And there's so many people who could go forward, who could be nominated as, you know, potential Irish president, because again, this is a very important role. The Irish president is very representative of our nation, as you mentioned. Mary Robinson.
We joke and say that we do have that moment where we go, oh, the Irish president, but do they have very much power? They really do, in terms of a constitutional role that is really important, and the ability to bring certain legislation to be checked by the Supreme Court in particular. I'm a big fan of that role. I think it's very important. It's a checks and balances, and it also is that person who represents us on an international stage, and people should really keep that in mind.
Very true. And also, I want to say as well that you mentioned Mary McAleese, who, again, terrific person, who also has been working to modernize the Catholic Church in terms of...
She's a canon lawyer of like the highest order.
She's brilliant. And Mary Robinson, who lay in front of bulldozers.
Well, if only she understood fossil fuels and that the science is...
Well, I mean,
Let me just clarify.
Yeah, I mean, she basically, you know, fought for Wood Key. She fought for gay rights. She's been an icon before it was cool to be an icon. So this is a person who we have to respect and just say, like, we've been blessed with Irish presidents. So let's hope we'll get a good one next time out. To round up, we have a small little one, and this is something that I think we understand from a GAA and rugby point of view. Just tell me if this is fair, what's happening right now.
Рафаэль Шафиев в майке с коротким рукавом, -7. Вот как в пляжном футболе, смотри, горочку поставил. Убрал горочку. Сейчас, если бы еще...
Igor Akinfeev, guest of the show, former guest of the show. It was snowing very heavily the weekend in Moscow, still is snowing heavily in Moscow, and he was building a little snow, like basically for place skating. I didn't see the problem with it. The referee in soccer, and soccer keepers can make a little mound you can dig your foot in, but they stopped it. That seems really weird, doesn't it?
Well, it was getting a little like, you know, one of the Egyptian pyramids. He had quite a little. It was like, has he got planning permission for that thing? But, you know.
Well, listen, if I saw a keeper doing it, like as a kid trying to kick it out from goals, you'd need something like that.
True, and it is on sand, so yeah.
It is. Okay, and on that note, say thank you very much, Aoife Cody. We will go out for the good night, and of course I will see you tomorrow. Yeah. So so I'll just have to make sure that we're going out on time. So until next time, of course, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see more of you on. I almost said another name, but on Capital Sports.
Da 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 da! It's the motherfucking DLW
3.0.